Inside Washington's Museum of the Bible, a single volume that is like no other. The so-called Slave Bible, remarkable not for what's in it, but for what's not.
So about 90% of the Old Testament's been removed and about 50% of the New Testament's been removed. To put it another way, a normal King James Version has 1,189 chapters in it. The Slave Bible has only 232.
Missing are chapters and verses that might have encouraged uprisings. Book of Exodus, redacted. No story of Moses demanding Pharaoh, "Let my people go." Gone is Galatians, and the verse, "There is neither bond nor free, for ye are all one in Christ Jesus." And no Jeremiah, "Woe unto him that useth his neighbor's service without wages."
What they've left in are verses such as Ephesians 6:5, which is the famous verse, "Slaves, be obedient to your master."
Looking at this Bible, it's hard to tell that anything's been taken out of it.
That's correct. I mean, it looks like a normal book. For many enslaved Africans, this would have been the first time they were exposed to the Bible.
A Bible selectively edited to instill obedience, using religion to underpin the horror of slavery. When people encounter this exhibit, what lasting impression do you want them to leave with?
But we want to pass the message on that may this never happen again. The Bible itself is a whole book. It's not one that you get to carve up and use this piece or that piece.
The Slave Bible designed to repress rebellion, but it didn't work. Enslaved people in the Caribbean constantly fought against slavery until emancipation.
I think it's very relevant to understand our history, not just American history, but our African American history, our roots and how we got to this point.
A dark chapter in the history of the good book.
My name is Anthony Schmidt, and I am Senior Curator at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. We are in our newest exhibit, or one of our newest exhibits, titled The Slave Bible.
Only it weren't for those filthy goddamn Christians.
Titled The Slave Bible, Let the Story Be Told. The formal name is Parts of the Holy Bible Selected for Use among the Negro Slaves in the British West India Islands. And it was published in 1807 in London by the London-based firm Law and Gilbert. Well, we think it was most likely produced by a missionary organization named the Society for the Conversion of Negro Slaves.
We have to understand that international law is not a panacea, and that it's a context that has a long, long history. And it's a history that is going back to what's called the family of nations. And in the Webster's New International Dictionary from 1950, the following definition of family of nations was provided. The aggregate of states, originally the Christian nations of Europe, which as a result of their antecedents have inherited a common civilization and are at a similar level of moral and political opinion and have been recognized by those states as being on that level. And there was another edition which talked similarly, and it said to include the Christian states of Europe and their offshoots in America.
And this was one of many missionary societies that popped up around 1800, dedicated to spreading Christianity around the globe, but mostly within the British colonies.
There's a little clarification. Here it says, for example, the term Indian or Indio has been applied to many peoples, including Indians of South Asia, as well as other groups found in the West Indies, the Americas. That's curious. And the East Indies, Filipinos, Chinese, Japanese, etc. So it says down here, the term Negro has been applied to black Africans, the Indians of India, Native Americans, Japanese, and slaves, about blacks rioting in British cities. So wait, they're calling all these people Negroes at one point in time. They're calling all these people Negroes at one point in time.
within the British colonies in Africa, Asia, and of course the Caribbean. And so this book was produced by the Society for use by their missionaries who were going to islands such as Jamaica and Barbados to establish schools and churches, and with the intention of converting enslaved Africans and educating them. And so this book was part of a broader program that they believed would improve the lives of enslaved Africans both materially and spiritually. Many of the missionaries were actually abolitionists, and so they fought hard for the abolition of the Atlantic slave trade. However, they were more conservative in their views in their social views. So they might have thought slavery was wrong, but they also thought it would be a greater evil to simply emancipate enslaved Africans. And so they believed that in order to prepare enslaved Africans for liberation, that they needed to be educated and somehow morally uplifted through the church. And so this book is aimed at justifying and reinforcing the slave system, but at the same time it was used to help teach Africans how to read, for example, and to somehow educate them in the classroom. We don't believe it was widely distributed. My theory is that it was they printed around 1,000 copies, something like that. The missionary organization wasn't very large. There were certainly much larger organizations at the time.
Include the Christian states of Europe and their offshoots in America, and so forth and so on. Henry Wheaton, who was the Supreme Court reporter at the time that Johnson v. McIntosh was handed down, wrote a volume on international law called The Elements of International Law that was published in 1836. And in the advertising to the first edition, he was talking about the natural law, more properly called the law of God, and so forth. And then he said the old Christian states of Western Europe were the original members of the family of nations, because the law of nations grew up gradually between them through customs and treaties. Whenever afterwards a new Christian state made its appearance in Europe, it was received into the existing society by the old members of the family of nations.
They probably supported around a dozen missionaries at their peak, which was sometime in the 18-teens.
Whenever afterwards a new Christian state made its appearance in Europe, it was received into the existing society by the old members of the family of nations. It is for this reason that this law was in former times frequently called European law of nations. And so it continues to talk about the Christian states of Europe, is my point. And it was only after Turkey was admitted in 1856, and Turkey was an Islamic country, that it could no longer be talked about in exclusively Christian terms.
And so we don't think that it was widely distributed, which explains why there aren't many copies around today. There are only 3 that we know of in existence. One is at Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee, which is on display here, and the other 2 are in the United Kingdom. Fisk was generously loaned us this item for our opening in November of 2017, and it's been on display on the impact floor, which is the 2nd floor of the museum here since then. And it's gathered a lot of attention from our guests who have come through to see the exhibit or done tours. We've received many questions from them and online as well. And so they've been very curious about it and wanted to know more about its history and its story. And so through our research, we've uncovered a pretty remarkable story. And we thought that it deserved to be told in a wider space, a space that would allow for more of an interaction with the book, that provided a space for our guests to respond. And so with the support of Fisk University and our colleagues at the Center for African American Religious Life at the National Museum of African American History and Culture, we collaborated and opened this exhibit this past month. The space towards the end, after you come through and see the story, see the book, and then walk through the book, in a sense, by looking at this collage we have of what was taken out, what verses were taken out, and what was left in. We have a space, a table, that asks 4 questions, and a guest can answer all of them or answer one. But they can receive a card, and they can reflect and put down with a pen their feelings and their thoughts on this particular story. And then they can hang that on the wall along with the answers that other guests have provided. And so we opened this space with the intention of allowing this type of reflection among the guests, and we've been really overwhelmed with the response we've received. Thousands of cards have been filled out, and they represent a wide range of opinions and emotions. And we've not only been happily surprised about the volume, but we've been very pleased with the type of reflection that guests have demonstrated in these cards. And what strikes me is the type of emotion that it's eliciting in the guests. So ranges from shock to sadness to anger, and so it covers a wide range of emotions too. We didn't have a lot to go on at the very beginning, and it was almost all the information we had was basically contained on the title page. We knew the long title, which was very detailed, and that helped. We knew the place of publication, London, and we knew the publishers. And so we also knew it was an abridged Bible. So right away we had a sense that it was probably a missionary book, because of the title states it's intended for those people in that region. So we began to just follow the clues. We looked into some missionary organizations that were active in the area during that time, but then we began looking into the publishers. And so we were able to track down other publications that they produced at this time, and lo and behold, they also produced or published the minutes of the annual meeting of the Society for the Conversion of Negro Slaves. And so we knew there was a link there somehow. So there's a history. There's a history between these two organizations. And so then we began researching that society, and we began uncovering some actual names of missionaries that were active in the region and what they were using, what they were requesting from the society. All of this stuff was printed in the minutes. And we began seeing the missionaries, when they provided the audits of what they received from in donations, we began uncovering titles such as Select Parts of the Holy Bible, 15, along with 3 school books or 3 arithmetic books and 5 candles and whatnot. And so now we're starting to sense that, yeah, I think we're getting very close. And we began reading more of the writings of the leaders of the society, principally a man by the name of Bilby Porteous, who was the Bishop of London and the founder of the society. And in a very famous letter in 1807, at the same time that the first slave Bible that we know of was published, he describes the tactics that he recommends the missionaries use in their interaction with the Africans in the Caribbean. And one of the tactics is provide a Bible that has selected parts that will teach enslaved Africans to be obedient to their masters. And so when we uncovered that, you know, this, with the publishers, their intentions, the way they used it, it all fit together. And so that was pretty exciting. It's like finding a needle in a haystack, because especially since we didn't have a lot to go on at the beginning.
What's that? Oh, hi, you're still here.
But we also have to realize that our history is complicated, and it has lots of things in it that we may be embarrassed by, we may find shameful, but to embrace it all and appreciate that tells us more about who we are today and the problems we have today, because it's not the old cliche that history repeats itself, but the past, the structure of our government, the nature of democratic practices, these things do shape what happened before, does shape what happens today.